Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to bypass all the noise, all the wellness fads, and deliver pure, actionable intelligence.
And we've got the perfect source material for that. We're doing a deep dive into what's being called the Visceral Fat Dossier from sundry.com.
Exactly. And this isn't, a typical conversation about dieting or losing a few pounds for the beach. This is something else entirely.
It really is. The material is tailored very specifically for a group sundry.com calls this strategic veteran. Think successful people, 40 plus, who live and die by data. They want a high ROI on their effort, and they demand strategies rooted in hard biology, not just, anecdotes.
Right. So our mission briefing today is to understand visceral adipose tissue. We'll call it VAT, not as some cosmetic issue, but as what the dossier calls a genuine metabolic insurgency.
And the goal is a hostile takeover of your own biology. It's about using the kind of high-resolution intelligence in this document to execute a physiological counter-coup.
A counter-coup. I like that. And this all starts from one fundamental premise, doesn't it? That preserving your biological capital is the #1 priority.
It is. And to do that, you have to correctly identify the enemy. So the absolute first distinction we have to make is this. Why is the fat stored around your internal organs? The VAT, so fundamentally different, so much more dangerous than the fat right under your skin.
The subcutaneous fat, or SAT.
Exactly. Getting that distinction right is the pivot point for every single strategic decision that follows.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this threat profile. Section 1, the biological enemy. Why are we treating VAT like some kind of, hostile entity inside the body?
Well, to define the threat, let's start with the friendly, or at least the neutral party, SAT, the subcutaneous fat.
The stuff you can pinch.
Precisely. It's relatively benign. Its structure is designed to be a passive energy reservoir. It's like a safe long-term savings account for calories. It also works as a thermal insulator.
So it's a buffer. It's built for storage. It's not very active.
Yeah.
It's a well-regulated national reserve of energy.
That's a great analogy. It's a reserve bank. Now contrast that with VAT. The dossier from sundry.com defines VAT, and this is critical, as a pathological endocrine organ.
An organ, not just fat.
Not just fat. It's not passive storage. It's biologically hyperactive, it's highly vascularized, and, most importantly, it's anatomically invasive. It literally weaves itself into the mesentery, wrapping around your vital infrastructure, your liver, your pancreas, your intestines.
So it's not just taking up space. It's in a position of strategic advantage, and it's actively transmitting signals from there.
Toxic signals, that's the insurgency. Its location and its output are what make it so incredibly dangerous. And because of that, any strategy has to reject those superficial metrics like the number on a scale.
Right.
And focus entirely on reducing this invasive biological liability. That's how you preserve your systemic biological capital.
Okay, and the mechanism that turns this bad location into systemic disease, the dossier calls it the portal vein hypothesis. This sounds serious. A first-pass catastrophe.
It is elegant in how destructive it is. So get this. All the stuff released by these visceral fat cells, we're talking free fatty acids, inflammatory compounds, they don't just go into your general circulation.
Where do they go?
They drain directly into the portal vein. Now, the portal vein is the superhighway that carries everything from your digestive tract straight to the liver for processing.
So instead of being diluted across the whole body, the liver gets the first direct concentrated hit.
The first and hardest hit. It's immediately inundated with a high concentration of these toxic inputs. That's the first pass catastrophe. Your liver, which is supposed to be regulating your entire metabolism, is subtly drowning in an inflammatory sludge.
So what does the liver do under that kind of assault? How quickly does that cascade turn into real-world risk?
Well, the liver tries to cope. The flood of free fatty acids forces it to package them into triglycerides and VLDL particles. But the really critical part is the inflammation. That constant inflammatory bombardment drives what we call hepatic insulin resistance.
The liver goes deaf to insulin.
Perfectly put. It stops listening to the signals telling it to quit producing glucose. So even if you haven't eaten in hours, your liver is just pumping glucose into your blood, raising your blood sugar across the board. It's the very definition of metabolic breakdown.
And for our listeners, the strategic veteran, what does this mean when they look at their blood work? What's the signature of this disaster?
It creates a very specific, very high-risk lipid profile. First, you'll see chronically high triglycerides. That's all that excess fat circulating in your blood. But the most dangerous part is the change in your cholesterol particle size. The system starts churning out a ton of small, dense LDL particles.
And why are those the bad guys? the small, dense ones?
Because they're highly atherogenic, they're small enough to wiggle their way into the lining of your arteries, and once they're trapped in there, they oxidize very easily, and that oxidation is the trigger for arterial plaque. This sends your cardiovascular risk through the roof, way beyond what a simple total cholesterol number might tell you.
Wow. So the damage starts locally at the liver, but the consequence is systemic cardiovascular decay. It's not just the fat, it's the toxic waste it's pumping out from its prime location.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next piece, the endocrine insurgency. This isn't just about fat release. VAT is actively sabotaging your body's communication systems.
Like a communications jammer.
Precisely. VAT is a hub of chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation. It's an aggressive factory for pro-inflammatory messengers called cytokines. The two key saboteurs the sundry.com dossier points to are tumor necrosis factor alpha TNF-alpha and interleukin-6, or IL-6.
And just the names alone sound like they're designed to create metabolic chaos.
And they are. So think of insulin as the key that should open the doors to your muscle cells, letting glucose in for fuel. TNF-alpha and IL-6 are like chemical agents that jam the lock. They physically interfere with the insulin receptor, specifically messing with the GLUT4 transporters that actually move glucose out of the blood.
So the key might be in the lock and turning, but these inflammatory cytokines are basically holding the door shut from the inside.
That's a perfect analogy. The muscles can't take up the glucose, so it stays in the bloodstream, leading to high blood sugar. The pancreas sees this, and thinking the signal isn't getting through, it panics and pumps out even more insulin.
Which just makes the whole problem worse.
Way worse. You end up with high blood sugar and high insulin at the same time. And that, of course, feeds a devastating feedback loop.
How so?
Well, the higher your insulin and blood sugar, the more readily you store fat as VAT, and the more aggressively that VAT pumps out these inflammatory cytokines. It's a self-sustaining cycle of tissue breakdown and escalating cardiovascular risk. This is why you can't just ignore it. It's an active, degrading force that has to be shut down.
Which brings us to section 2. We're moving from the cellular level up to the broad hormonal battlefield. This is especially critical for, our listeners in that 40 to 55 age bracket who are already dealing with some natural hormonal shifts.
Oh, absolutely. The documents are really clear on this. For the strategic veteran, the fight against VAT is, at its core, a hormonal one. Visceral fat accumulation speeds up the decline of anabolic hormones like testosterone, while at the same time, it promotes the rise of catabolic stress hormones, mainly cortisol.
Let's start with the big one from male listeners. The testosterone VAT feedback loop. Sundry.com calls it, and this is pretty stark, chemical castration. That's intense language.
It is, but the mechanism really justifies it. Look, testosterone is your primary anabolic asset. It drives muscle, metabolic rate, energy, everything. The relationship between V8 and testosterone is this destructive inverse loop.
A death spiral.
A physiological death spiral. If your T is low, for whatever reason, age, stress, you become more likely to accumulate VAT. Then that new VA actively works to suppress your T production even further.
So low T leads to more belly fat, and the belly fat itself becomes an engine to drive T even lower. What's the specific biological engine here? What's the chemical culprit?
The culprit is an enzyme called aromatase. And visceral adipose tissue, particularly in the abdomen, is uniquely packed with this enzyme.
And what does aromatase do?
Its job is chemical conversion. It takes testosterone, the primary male sex hormone, and it converts it directly into estradiol, the primary female sex hormone.
Wait, just to be crystal clear here. The fat tissue itself, this pathological organ, is hijacking the most powerful anabolic hormone in a man's body and turning it into estrogen.
That is precisely what is happening. The fat tissue is acting as a feminizing agent. And the crucial thing is the scale. As your VAT volume increases, the total mass of this aromatase active tissue grows with it. The conversion process accelerates. This is why sundry.com is so blunt, calling it a chemical castration mechanism driven by the fat tissue itself.
The implication then is that the ROI on reducing VAT is just exponential. You're not just losing fat, you're taking the brakes off your body's own testosterone production.
Exactly. Better energy, better muscle retention, better insulin sensitivity. It's a huge metabolic victory on multiple fronts. It has to be the top strategic priority.
But it's not just testosterone, is it? We have to talk about the other side of the coin, the cortisol connection, or as we're calling it, the stress belly axis. I mean, our target listener, the high-achieving professional, is often swimming in chronic stress.
Yeah, and chronic stress is rightly labeled the hormonal architect of central adiposity. An acute cortisol surge is fine. It's necessary for performance, for survival. The problem is the chronic low levels simmer from work deadlines, financial pressure, poor sleep, that acts as direct VAT fertilizer.
But why does cortisol specifically target the belly? Why doesn't chronic stress just make you fat all over?
It comes down to a structural vulnerability. It's about receptors. Visceral fat tissue has a much, much higher density of glucocorticoid receptors. Those are the docking stations for cortisol, than subcutaneous fat on your hips or thighs.
So the visceral fat is basically built with more antennas to receive that stress signal.
It's engineered to receive it preferentially. So when your stress axis is constantly activated, cortisol is binding to these abundant receptors in your abdomen and aggressively stimulating fat storage specifically there. It's an ancient survival mechanism gone haywire in the modern office.
Evolutionarily, stress meant famine or danger, so you'd store energy centrally for quick access.
Right. But now, that threat is a spreadsheet or a bad quarterly report, and the result is the same. Abdominal fat accumulation. The conclusion is just unavoidable. Your corporate stress is literally building your visceral fat.
Okay, moving on to section 3. Intelligence gathering. You can't fight an enemy you can't see. Our listeners are analytical. They need good data. Tactical baselining.
And that starts by acknowledging the failure of the standard tools. The documents really hammer this point home. You have to critique the common metrics.
Let's start with the one everyone knows but is often, deeply flawed. BMI.
Body mass index. It's called a crude instrument. And for the strategic veteran, it's basically useless. It's just a ratio of your weight to your height. It has a fatal flaw. It can't tell the difference between metabolically beneficial lean muscle and adipose liabilities.
So a fit, muscular person could be flagged as overweight or even obese.
Easily. It completely masks their actual health. It's just not fit for purpose in this kind of analytical context.
Okay, what about the tech a lot of people have at home?
Yeah.
The smart scales that use bioelectrical impedance, BIA.
They're also deemed not fit for tactical baselining. The tech is just too prone to error. BIA sends a little electrical current through you and measures resistance, but that reading is massively influenced by things like your hydration level, whether you just worked out. It's just not stable.
And crucially, it can't see the real target.
It can't. It gives you a total body fat number, but it completely lacks the resolution to specifically quantify VAT, which is the only metric we really care about here.
So we need high-resolution, clinical-grade data, which brings us to the gold standard, DEXA, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry.
DEXA is the superior tool, absolutely. It gives you that objective quantitative metric. It uses 2 low-dose X-rays to generate what sundried.com calls a true balance sheet of your body composition. Bone, lean mass, and fat mass, broken down by specific regions.
And that regional breakdown is the key. You can see exactly what's going on in the abdominal area where VAT lives.
Yes, it lets you track progress not just on total fat, but specifically in that high-risk visceral compartment.
So for our listeners who are going to go get a DEXA scan, what are the tactical benchmarks? What are the numbers they need to know for VAT volume?
These numbers are critical. The optimal risk zone, where the threat is minimal, is less than 100 cubic centimeters of VAT volume.
Okay, under 100.
The high risk zone, where intervention is basically mandatory, is anything over 160 cubic centimeters. Those are hard, tangible targets, far more valuable than a number on a scale.
That's the clinical standard. But people aren't getting DXA scans every week. What's the practical, high-frequency field metric for monitoring? The dossier points to the waist-to-height ratio.
Yeah, for regular surveillance, WHTR is the most robust manual metric there is. All you need is a tape measure. It works so well because geometrically, as visceral fat builds up, it has nowhere to go but out. It pushes your abdominal wall forward. That circumference measurement captures the expansion directly.
And the tactical target is incredibly simple.
Beautifully simple. The goal is to keep your ratio at less than 0.5. That's the green zone. The example they give is perfect. A 6-foot-tall man is 72 inches. His waist needs to be under 36 inches. 36 divided by 72 is 0.5.
It's so simple and effective. It was
Yeah.
a top 10 tip. Kill the BIA scale, use WHDR 0.5.
Absolutely. It gives you immediate objective feedback on whether your plan is working. No clinic required.
Excellent. Okay, enemy defined, measurement protocols established. Let's move to section 4. Tactical operations nutritional engineering. And the emphasis here is not on starvation, but on strategic resource allocation and, crucially, insulin management. We have to start this section by neutralizing the single greatest saboteur for this demographic, what the dossier calls the alcohol blockade. Sundry.com identifies alcohol as the primary saboteur. I think a lot of people just assume, oh, it's the empty calories in a beer or a glass of wine. But the problem is much deeper, isn't it? It's about the liver.
It's way more mechanistic than just calories. The core issue is a fundamental disruption of what's called hepatic lipid oxidation. That's just a fancy term for the liver's ability to burn fat.
Okay, so how does alcohol disrupt that?
When you drink ethanol, your body treats it as a poison. Detoxification immediately becomes the #1 priority. Nothing else matters. And that process dramatically changes the chemistry inside your liver cells.
You're talking about this NADH to NAD plus ratio. Break that down for us. Why is that ratio so important?
Right. So, metabolizing alcohol uses up a molecule called NAD plus V, and it produces a lot of NADH. When the ratio of NADH to NAD plus gets too high, it's like throwing a chemical wrench in the works. That high NADH environment chemically inhibits the key enzymes your liver needs to burn fatty acids.
Hold on. So the very presence of alcohol in your system doesn't just add calories, it physically flips a switch in your liver that says, halt all fat-burning operations immediately.
That is the acetate blockade. And while that blockade is active, which can be for hours, the burning of visceral fat is completely paused. All resources go to detox. Worse, any free fatty acids floating around are just shunted directly toward new fat creation right there in the liver.
So even if I had a perfect day high protein, great workout, a couple of drinks in the evening puts a total operational ceasefire on fat loss overnight.
It's an operational pause button. The conclusion is inescapable. For a significant ROI on your training, you need a sustained period of alcohol restriction or elimination to remove that blockade. Respect the blockade is a non-negotiable tip.
Okay, blockade understood. Let's move to structural integrity protein pacing. The documents talk about this challenge of anabolic resistance in aging muscle.
Yeah, this is a key reality for anyone over 40. Your muscle tissue just becomes less sensitive to the growth signals from the protein you eat. You need a bigger signal to get the same response.
And we need to maintain that muscle because it's our primary site for glucose disposal.
It's your metabolic engine. The more muscle you have, the better you manage blood sugar and insulin, which directly fights the VAT-driven insulin resistance.
Cool.
So to overcome this anabolic resistance, you need specific dosage and distribution.
What's the protocol?
Sundried.com recommends a total daily intake of about 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, but the distribution is the tactical key. You have to consume 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein per meal.
Per meal, not just the total for the day. Why that specific amount?
Because that threshold dose, specifically the amount of the amino acid leucine in it, is what's needed to flip the switch on muscle protein synthesis. It activates the mTOR pathway, which tells the muscle to grow and repair. If you spread that protein out in tiny 15-gram snacks all day, you never hit the threshold. You're firing blanks.
So it's about creating a strong enough signal to break through that age-related resistance.
Exactly. That's why protein first is a core tip. Anchor your meals with that dose.
And finally, nutrition-wise, intermittent fasting. How does shrinking the eating window help with VAT beyond just calorie control?
It's a tool for managing the timing of your metabolic state. A 16.8 window, for example, forces your body into a longer post-absorptive state. When you're not eating, your insulin levels naturally drop and stay low.
And low insulin is the green light for fat burning, for lipolysis.
It is. By extending that fasting period, you increase the amount of time your body spends in a fat oxidizing state. You're teaching it metabolic flexibility. It's a powerful way to leverage hormonal control with zero extra time commitment, which is perfect for this audience.
Excellent. Section 5, physical countermeasures. No more junk miles. We need specific, targeted training protocols.
The strategy has to be multimodal. We start with the foundation. Zone 2 training.
Define Zone 2 for us. What's the target and what's the biological goal?
Zone 2 is steady-state aerobic work where you keep your heart rate at 60 to 70% of your maximum. It's intentionally submaximal so you can sustain it for a long time. And the goal isn't to gasp for air. The goal is to build mitochondrial density and efficiency.
The cellular furnaces where fat actually gets burned.
Yes. Consistent Zone 2 training triggers mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new, better furnaces. By increasing their density, you improve your base metabolic rate. You're literally increasing the amount of fat you burn just sitting around. Zone 2 is base. You cannot skip the infrastructure investment.
Okay, once that foundation is built, we bring in the shock therapy, HIIT, high-intensity interval training. Specifically, the Norwegian 4x4 protocol.
Yep. This is the targeted chemical strike. The 4x4 is 4 minutes of all-out effort at 85 to 95% of your max heart rate, followed by 3 minutes of active recovery, and you repeat that 4 times. It's tough, but the results are huge for the time you put in.
And why is this specific intensity so good at targeting VAT?
It's pure chemistry. Visceral fat cells, as we said, are biologically active, and they have a very high density of something called beta-adrenergic receptors. Think of these as the release fat now button.
Okay.
An all-out effort, like the 4x4, produces a massive surge of catecholamines, adrenaline, and norepinephrine.
And the adrenaline hits those buttons on the VAT cells.
It preferentially binds to them. That flood of adrenaline activates those receptors and signals the visceral fat cells to aggressively dump their contents fatty acids into the bloodstream to be used as fuel. It's a precision chemical strike.
And the third pillar is resistance training, which the dossier says is non-negotiable for two reasons. The first is obvious: preserving muscle while you're losing fat.
Right, you have to protect the metabolic armor. Heavy lifting sends the mechanical signal to your body, do not sacrifice this tissue. The lift heavy mandate is crucial for maintaining that glucose disposal site.
But the second reason is fascinating. It's about weaponizing your muscle against your fat.
This is a beautiful piece of physiological strategy. When your muscles contract under heavy load, they release their own beneficial cytokines called myokines. And the one we're interested in here is also interleukin-6, IL-6.
Wait a minute, we just said IL-6 from VAT is the enemy, the saboteur that causes insulin resistance. How can it also be a good guy?
It's all about context. The IL-6 from VAT is part of a chronic, systemic inflammatory state that's destructive, but the IL-6 released from working muscle is transient, it's local, and it acts completely differently. It acts as a messenger that tells adipose tissue, especially VAT, to release its fatty acids to be used as fuel by the muscle that's working.
That is an amazing contrast. So the fat is releasing a bad IL-6 that causes problems, and the muscle releases a good IL-6 that demands the fat surrender its fuel.
You are literally weaponizing your muscle infrastructure to dismantle the VAT depot. That's why resistance training isn't optional, it's direct physiological warfare.
Okay, Section 6, Environmental Warfare. This is where so many plans fall apart. The variables of stress and sleep.
The dossier is emphatic here. Biologically, high stress is VAT fertilizer. You have to address the sleep cortisol axis. For the strategic veteran, this is often the first casualty of a busy schedule.
So what's happening hormonally when someone is consistently getting less than that recommended 7 or 8 hours?
Sleep deprivation, let's call it less than 6 hours a night, is a powerful driver of VAT storage because it completely messes with your key hormones. It immediately elevates cortisol, the stress hormone, and it cranks up ghrelin, the hunger hormone.
Okay, so you're stressed and you're starving.
And at the same time, it suppresses leptin, which is the hormone that tells you you're full.
Wow. High stress, intense hunger, and no off switch. That is a recipe for disaster.
It's the worst possible hormonal state. Your body interprets this as a profound threat, like a famine. And the biological signal is unmistakable. Store energy, store it fast, and store it as visceral fat to prepare for this perceived emergency.
The mandate then is absolute. Protect that sleep window like a high-value asset, because if you don't, it undermines everything else you're doing. Sleep is strategy.
It's a core directive. And to help manage that stress during the day, we can use tools like non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR.
How does something like NSDR or Yoga Nidra actually affect the stress axis?
They are basically tools for autonomic nervous system regulation. They guide your brain out of that stressed high beta wave state into a calmer alpha or theta wave state. It's a state of deep rest. This actively dampens that chronic destructive cortisol response. It's like giving your nervous system a pressure release valve.
Any other environmental tactics mentioned in the dossier?
Yes. Cold exposure. Things like cold showers or deliberate cold plunges. This acts as a good kind of stress, a hormetic stressor. It teaches your system to be more resilient, so it's less likely to dump cortisol over minor daily frustrations. Plus, it activates brown adipose tissue, which can actually burn energy to generate heat.
All right, this is incredible. That brings us to our final section, Section 7, Synthesis and Protocols. This is where we put it all together. Actionable battle plans from sundried.com.
And we have to reiterate the core principle. Visceral fat is the biological manifestation of chaos. The only solution is to impose order through discipline and data.
Let's start with the full strategic protocol. This is for the person who is all in, ready for a complete overhaul. What's the order of operations?
First, reconnaissance. Get a baseline DXA scan and start weekly WHTR monitoring. Goal, less than 0.5. Second, chemical ceasefire. A complete restriction of alcohol to eliminate the acetate blockade.
And the nutritional infrastructure.
Nutritional engineering. Hit that 1.6 grams per kilo protein target, making sure you get 30-40 grams per meal, and use a 16.8 eating window to manage insulin.
Followed by the physical work.
Kinetic operations. The 3 pillars. Build the base with Zone 2, fortify with heavy resistance training, and apply shock therapy with HIIT. And finally, recovery. Protect sleep at all costs and use NSDR to manage stress. That plan addresses every single angle of the insurgency.
But we know our listeners are busy, so the documents also provide an 80-20 plan for the person who's serious but not all in yet.
Right, the Pareto principle. First, the alcohol audit. If you can't eliminate it, cut it by 50%. That addresses the single biggest bottleneck. Huge ROI.
What's next on the 80-20 list?
Protein anchoring. Just focus on getting 40 grams of protein in your first and last meals of the day. That ensures you hit that anabolic threshold twice, maximizes satiety, and protects muscle with minimal effort.
And the third one is deceptively simple. The walk.
Yes, a 20-minute brisk walk immediately after dinner. This is so effective at helping your muscles soak up the glucose from your meal, which blunts the insulin spike and prevents that glucose from being stored as fat.
Okay, what about the listener who's absolutely slammed? No extra time, but they need maximum efficiency.
They need density, not duration. The go-to here is SIT, sprint interval training, the 20-second protocol. You warm up, do 3 20-second all-out sprints with 2 minutes of recovery between them. The whole thing takes 10 minutes.
And those 3 sprints create that massive adrenaline surge we talked about.
A huge hormonal disruption for a tiny time investment. The other tactic is simply to tighten the time-restricted eating window to 18.6. No extra time required, just more discipline with your insulin management.
Let's lay out the minimum effective dose matrix. The listener has exactly 3 hours a week. How do they spend it?
It's a very structured week. Session 1, 45 minutes, heavy resistance, compound lifts only. Deadlift, squat, press, 3 sets of 5 reps. That's your muscle preservation signal.
Session 2.
Session 2, 45 minutes. Norwegian 4x4 HIIT. That's your shock therapy for VAT mobilization and top-end fitness.
And the last 90 minutes, probably on the weekend.
Session 3, 90 minutes. Long duration Zone 2. A hike, a bike ride. This is for building those mitochondria. This matrix hits strength, intensity, and endurance. Lean and very effective.
And for the final strategy, the one for the person who wants to throw everything at this, the IPO strategy.
Yeah.
But there's a big caution here, right?
A huge caution. Don't confuse volume with value. Overtraining raises cortisol, which, as we know, fuels VAT. This approach requires meticulous data tracking to avoid that.
So what does that data-driven, all-in approach look like?
It starts with data. Quarterly DGAXI scans and full blood panels, including testosterone, C-reactive protein for inflammation, and cortisol. You're tracking the inputs and the outputs.
And using tech to manage the load.
Tech, a wearable like a Whoop or Aura Ring to track heart rate variability. You only do a hard workout on a day your HRV shows you're recovered. This prevents overtraining.
Then you added the environmental factors, the thermals.
Right. Daily cold water immersion, maybe 3 minutes, and then a sauna session, 20 minutes. These provide powerful metabolic signals without adding more physical strain.
And lastly, the supplement stack mentioned.
It's very targeted. Ashwagandha for cortisol management, berberine for insulin sensitivity, and the foundational trio of vitamin D, zinc, and magnesium for testosterone support. It's the full arsenal, but guided by data, not just effort.
This has been an incredibly detailed operational guide. Let's finish with a final summary. The absolute most critical takeaways from the sundry.com dossier.
There are 3 non-negotiable levers. First, the data. Kill the BIA scale and obsess over your waist-to-height ratio. The goal is less than 0.5. If you measure nothing else, measure that.
Second, the protein density.
Protein first. You have to consistently hit that 30 to 40 gram threshold per meal to protect your muscle armor.
And third, the biggest saboteur, the blockade.
Respect the blockade. If you are serious about this, eliminating or drastically restricting alcohol is the single most effective chemical ceasefire you can impose. It removes the biggest obstacle.
And the overarching principle here is compounding consistency. It's not about one heroic effort. It's about small, strategic deposits that yield massive long-term dividends.
Visceral fat is the manifestation of chaos. Imposing order through these data-driven protocols is the only path to victory in this metabolic insurgency.
So here's the provocative thought for you, the learner, to take away from this deep dive. If visceral fat truly is the biological manifestation of chaos, and we know that chaos is driven by hormonal sabotage, specifically cortisol and aromatase, how might recognizing that fundamentally change the way you structure your professional life? Do you start viewing sleep and stress management not as luxuries or things to be cut when a deadline looms, but as essential, non-negotiable security measures against metabolic subversion? Something to think about.
Until next time.
Dive deep and stay strategic.